There are some questions surrounding this Buffalo Bills team, but I know the only one that Bills fans are worried about is can they beat the damn Chiefs this time around in January? Well, I unfortunately don't have the answer to that, but like I said, I do know that there are some questions about this team that are going to need to be answered. Some green lights with pockets of this roster that this team is going to have to hit if they're going to find themselves back in that position to beat the Chiefs and hopefully get the damn thing done this year. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So welcome to a deep dive into the 2025 Buffalo Bills. So in this video, we will be going through every position group for this Bills team, as well as the coaching staff. And with each of those chapters, we will start by asking if they got better, worse, or stayed the same from their offseason changes at that spot. And as always in this series, we'll begin by breaking down this Bills coaching staff. And the Bills were fortunate enough to retain their offensive coordinator, Joe Brady, who's drawing a lot of interest as a head coach candidate around the league. So no change with their coaching staff. They will be staying neutral there, though depending on your thoughts on Sean McDermott, that might be a good thing or a bad thing. Let's break down Sean McDermott and his coaching staff. I have really become just like straight up not that big of a fan of Sean McDermott. And not to begin this video with too much of a negative overtone, but I mean, seriously, it's time to shit or get off the pot. If Sean McDermott were the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars or the Cleveland Browns or the Las Vegas Raiders and the expectation was just to get back into playoff contention again, that's great. He'd be a perfectly fine head coach for that. I think he's really good at building a culture, establishing that team chemistry in the locker room. He's a pretty good defensive coach. For example, I have him as the 19th overall head coach in the NFL. And when you look at their overall defensive coaching rankings as well, as Sean McDermott is ultimately the overseer of this defense, even if he does have Bobby Babich as his defensive coordinator, the Bills get respectable rankings for their defensive coaching, especially for run defense, where they rank inside the top 10, ranking 5th to 9th for my run defense coach rankings that I give every team in this series, and pretty damn solid for pass defense coaching as well, ranking as high as 13th there, 13th to 21st. But what do I always say about defensive head coaches? If you're going to forego the opportunity to lock in a true offensive mastermind at that all-important play caller position for your organization as your head coach in this offensive league, that defensive head coach damn sure better be an elite defensive coach. Someone like a Brian Flores or Steve Spagnuolo, Vic Fangio, D'Amico Ryans. Notice how a lot of those guys are just defensive coordinators too, because there's so many great defensive coaches out there to be hired as your defensive coordinator. So Sean McDermott finds himself as a pretty middle-of-the-road defensive coach, and yeah, a really good culture builder, but probably not to the degree of like Dan Campbell or John Harbaugh or Jim Harbaugh or what we're expecting from Pete Carroll this year. You know what I'm saying? That elite CEO style coach as well, that's not necessarily bringing anything to the table scheme-wise, but can really rally a locker room. Yeah, the Bills have a really good culture. It's not quite as elite as some of those elite CEO types of coaches have built as well. So at the end of the day, when you have Josh Allen, one of the obvious elite Hall of Fame premium quarterbacks in the NFL, and you keep knocking on the doorstep of the Super Bowl because of your offense, and they've already had to cycle through losing their offensive coordinator, Brian Daboll. It took him a couple years to land back with another good play caller in Joe Brady, who, yes, Bills fans, you're going to lose him after this season. I get that the Bills have won a lot of football games, that they had some really down years before Sean McDermott arrived here. That's all really nice, and Sean McDermott deserves a level of credit for that, but this is so familiar to what Ron Rivera was able to do for the Washington Commanders. Hell, Sean McDermott is a Ron Rivera disciple, and eventually that fruit wasn't giving you any more juice as you look to squeeze it. And that's really where I feel like the Bills are at with Sean McDermott. They keep coming into the playoffs, and yeah, he's able to put together a pretty good defense out of a pretty good defensive roster. I think some blame does also go to the front office and that they just haven't been able to land superstar talent to help lift Sean McDermott's defense up to high levels. But McDermott's a part of that in terms of, voicing who he wants for this defense and all that stuff. But let's face it, the Bills ain't falling short of the Super Bowl because of their offense. It's this defense letting them down year in, year out. And frankly, they seem to not play their best in January as McDermott seems to get out-schemed by those premium offensive-minded coaches that you'd probably rather just be the Bills head coach. So, yeah, McDermott's very solid, but I have become very impatient with him as the head coach here, and I'm sorry to begin this deep dive with a negative note. I know there is a split in Bills Mafia between Sean McDermott supporters and Bills fans that share the same sentiment I have, but this is my opinion on it, man. Win the damn Super Bowl this year or get off the pot, Sean McDermott. Promote Joe Brady to be the head coach instead of losing him as your offensive coordinator, or go out and find someone else to do this. That's just where I'm at with this. It's no disrespect to Sean McDermott. I think he should land back as a head coach for someone, just as Ron Rivera did when the Panthers moved on from him. And I'm sure he could do a really good job building up the culture for a poor organization, just like he did here in Buffalo. But there is a ceiling to this type of head coach. And again, big year to get the damn thing done, or I absolutely think the Bills should move on from him. I don't know that they will, but I've got a pretty hard opinion on that at this point. Now, with all of that said, I do want to break down this Bills defensive scheme as well and what they look like here X's and O's wise. It hasn't changed too much over the years. It's going to be that base 4-2 split safety style defense where you're going to get that 4-2 nickel front. In fact, last year the Bills ran, bar none, the most nickel defense in the league, and that's really been their staple. They ran like a base defense, whether it was 3-4 or 4-3, just 3% of the time last year. That is a full lean into a light front. Most teams are kind of in the 15 to 20% range. We've seen some teams tick up to 30, even 40% in the case of like the Detroit Lions. But the Bills really do believe that they can kind of play that conservative brand of football, that they can find a way to stop the run out of these 4-2 fronts. And, to their credit, they've done a pretty good job at that. Not an amazing job at it. I think there are some times where you watch the Bills and say, hey, I'm not really afraid of running into the teeth of the Buffalo Bills, but generally speaking, they do a good job limiting explosive plays. I think one area of this defensive coaching staff that deserves a ton of credit is they do get these defensive backs to really value that run game aspect of playing defensive back in terms of tackling and getting off blocks and understanding that if you have a hive mind mentality from your safeties and slot corner, a guy like Teron Johnson, and even your outside corners, that you can really allow your team to live in those 4-2 fronts and have a solid run defense if the defensive backs contribute, as opposed to I think of the Cleveland Browns in, I think the 2023 season, where they had that elite pass rush, but the run defense was really bad because nobody tackled. The Bills are kind of the opposite of that. They don't have this incredible front, but they do really get involved, and that allows them to live in nickel so much. So that is something they do really, really well here under Sean McDermott. But there are some drawbacks to that as well. And on top of that, they also play that kind of conservative, split zone, off zone coverage style defense on the back end. And generally speaking, they're going to kind of let you take the underneath stuff, ideally play that bend don't break style defense. If it takes a perfectly well executed 15 play drive to take underneath throws and run the football to score a touchdown on us, the Bills are going to live in that world. They're not necessarily going to load up the box. They're not going to blitz a ton to get you into 3-and-out types of drives. That's just the overall brand of defense that Sean McDermott learned under Ron Rivera and really has always coached here in Buffalo. Just lighter fronts, a lot of zone coverage, going to be bottom third of the league in man coverage and blitz rate pretty much every single year. And I think that, as a philosophy makes sense when you look back on this Sean McDermott era and this Bills defense and say, well, yeah, they've been a pretty solid, stable, kind of conservative defense, But at no point in the Sean McDermott era has anybody been afraid of the Bills defense. And at no point have they been like a top 5 championship caliber defense. And it's not, to me, just personnel. I think that is an issue, but you do have to like mix things up and be a little bit more unpredictable and be good at blitzing against certain opponents and be more adaptable. I don't think you can just live in this world against every opponent and expect success, especially when your literal kryptonite, the Kansas City Chiefs, has spent years perfecting how they can beat this style of defense, because that's how the whole league has chosen to attack the Kansas City Chiefs, is prevent those big plays, make you nickel and dime their way down the field. And the Chiefs at this point are more than comfortable doing that. So there's definitely a lot of frustrations with their approach, but at the same time, it has risen the floor. They have generally speaking, I think gotten more with less with their defensive roster talent. If they have the 20th best roster, they're going to finish as the 12th best defense. If they have the 13th best roster, they're going to finish as the 7th best defense, that kind of thing. This isn't some Herculean, Brian Flores effort where you're taking one of the worst rosters in the league and getting the top 5 defense out of it or anything like that. But it is, generally speaking, again, good defensive coaching, high floor, low ceiling overall with this defense. And it just puts a lot of pressure on your offense and increases your margin for error with everything on that side of the ball. And that's what we've seen in the playoffs, is they end up in all these close game scenarios and they just haven't gotten, frankly, lucky enough. Whether it's a poor measurement on 4th and inches, whether it's that conservative style, allowing a 2-play, 12-second, 50-yard drive, whatever it was, in the 13-second meltdown against the Chiefs. But it has, generally speaking, been a defense that frustrates bad offenses and allows this team to win a lot of games when they do have a juggernaut offense. So that's just overall where I'm at with Sean McDermott and the defense and the defensive coaching here. But obviously, when everything we said is going to be the case, having Joe Brady here and having an elite offense is going to be this team's best path to winning a Super Bowl and getting this thing done. And man, this is very likely the last year that this team's going to have Joe Brady here. I find it very unlikely that he's going to get to this next hiring cycle and NFL teams aren't going to be throwing a huge pile of cash at him to come in and be a head coach in the NFL for the first time. This is very reminiscent to me of Ben Johnson, who I think everybody thought was going to leave after 2023, and he went back to hopefully get the whole thing done in Detroit. Very similar vibes here with Joe Brady. It's like one last ride type of deal. So we'll see if it kind of plays out that way in terms of him being that head coach candidate. But I think you can make a pretty damn strong argument that it's like him and Chris Shula, and like maybe Jesse Minter. Those are probably your top 3 head coach candidates for the upcoming hiring cycle. So when you have a defensive head coach, you're always going to be at risk of this. And in the case of the Bills, they will have to find someone internally or externally eventually to have to fill these shoes. But as long as they have Joe Brady, they are in excellent hands. I think their offensive coaching actually exceeds how good their defensive coaching rankings is, and that's reflected in my rankings. So they come in ranking 5th to 8th for pass game coaching and 3rd to 7th for run game coaching. Not only is Joe Brady an excellent coach, but he has crafted a very well-balanced offense here in Buffalo. And really, since he took over as the offensive coordinator in 2023, mid-season they made that change. The Bills have been, a top 3 offense in both passing and running. So it's been a skyrocket trajectory since he took over here. And it was always kind of interesting, too, when he got hired as, I think it was the quarterback's coach from Carolina when everything was a mess in 2022. It was always kind of interesting, like, he could find himself in a really good spot there in Buffalo getting to work with Josh Allen. But as far as how he's had that success and what the scheme looks like here in Buffalo, they've crafted that kind of modern pro spread approach that you see in like Philadelphia, for example, kind of like what Shane Steichen had built in Philadelphia and was trying to design with Anthony Richardson as well. But the idea of a lot of shotgun, spread you out, involve the quarterback in your run game, a lot of inside zone from shotgun, taking an athletic tight end that can kind of, do a little bit of everything, but flex out wide. And then just have a really lethal, quick-hitting passing game that acts as an extension of your run game. And here in Buffalo, it's not necessarily like RPOs and a bunch of bubble screens. Yes, they will do that type of stuff, and stress you towards the sideline if you're going to load up the box to try to stop the run here. But it's, when you have a Josh Allen, you're able to put a lot of stuff on his plate to read out the defense and make the right decisions. He has developed so brilliantly in that way. So they've really crafted this passing game with like a lot of slot types. You got your two tight ends, you got Khalil Shakir, they've got a couple other slot weapons in there, and they just do kind of call quick passes on early downs, pick you apart, stay ahead of the sticks. And then they're awesome in like short yardage situations, unless you're playing the Chiefs in the AFC Championship and you get a bad measurement that forces a rule change that finally puts the electric chips in the ball. But generally speaking, they are awesome at leaning into like QB power and getting creative to tap into Josh Allen's skills as a runner. And that's all been kind of a new evolution for Joe Brady. Like, yes, they had a spread style kind of, Peyton Manning-esque nickel and dime, pick you apart passing game in that LSU offense with Joe Burrow, but the idea of having like a power threat, rushing threat at QB and being able to lean into that and vary their run game with different types of gap runs and inside zone, it's just all been really brilliantly crafted here. And their vertical passing game is, I think, schemed up well. They just haven't quite had the right bodies to do it here, as long as Joe Brady's been here. But yeah, it's a brilliant offense, and just get her done, Bills fans, because you saw what happened when Brian Daboll left here, and it wasn't pretty for a couple years until you kind of found Joe Brady. And there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to just find another guy that can push the right buttons and put guys in a position to succeed in the way that Joe Brady has done here. So even if I'm hard on Sean McDermott, and I think he's a good, not great head coach when you're a team expecting to win a Super Bowl, and that's just not a great position to be in, it's not like he dooms this team either, right? Like, they've obviously been super close. They're going to have a high floor defense, and then, at least for now, the offensive coaching is I can't say as good as it gets, because there's some brilliant offensive minds in the league, but it is damn good here in Buffalo. So it's still an excellent staff as long as Joe Brady is here. You take the Joe Brady element out of this, start to add a lot more questions there. But we are going to move forward into the roster breakdown here, but before we do that, I do want to thank the sponsor for today's video, SeatGeek. Bills fans, you're getting a new stadium here, but Highmark Stadium, I think, will live in the hearts of so many members of Bills Mafia. This is your last year to go catch a Bills game in that authentic stadium before you get the pretty looking new Superplex. But SeatGeek has got you covered, Bills fans or any other sports fans, whether you want to go catch a ball game, catch your favorite team in the pennant race here, or go see your other football team and you're just an NFL diehard here for the Bills deep dive. But SeatGeek has the best user interface. They color code every single seat. So as long as you look for the green dots, you're getting the best price, not just on the SeatGeek app, but market competitive prices as well. You'll get the tickets right there in your app. You don't have to jump through email chains and track down third parties, have this stressful situation as you approach the gate. It's a seamless process. And now if you use code TFG10 when you buy your tickets, you will support my channel and, more importantly, save up to $20 on your next purchase as well. So that's code TFG10 at checkout on SeatGeek, and thanks to SeatGeek for sponsoring this deep dive. But yes, let's get into this Bills roster, beginning with the quarterback conversation and Josh Allen. I mean, frankly, not a ton left to say with Josh Allen. He has reached absolutely that elite of the elite level and has really opened up the conversation off the heels of an MVP season, when the year before that he had a case to be the MVP as well. But this has just reached a point where I don't think there's anybody out there that would sit here and tell you that Josh Allen is in a true elite quarterback that the Bills should expect to be in Super Bowl contention with every single year, as long as they put an adequate roster around him. And frankly, we're going to go through every pocket of this roster, but this isn't some super team around Josh Allen, but this team still put together a 13-win season on the heels of Josh Allen, and we're a, short yardage attempt away from going to the Super Bowl this year. So I could sit here and rave about Josh Allen, arguably the most physically gifted quarterback in the history of the NFL. When you talk about size, arm strength, athleticism, not just the rocket arm, but this guy really does have like Cam Newton-esque physical tools in terms of his ability to scramble for first downs, to get involved in the design run game. But the way he's developed his accuracy, really cool look, by the way, for those that haven't caught the Bills Hard Knocks, but really cool inside look at the kind of technology with, I don't know all the details, but the specific QB mechanics coaches that they have and all of the technology that they've used to really improve Josh Allen's throwing motion that has improved to better accuracy, something that has really been at the forefront of QBs for once, like being able to become more accurate passers. Because for a long time coming out of college, it's like, well, he can't really, hit the broadside of the barn. He's never going to be able to do that. That narrative has changed. The idea now is you can develop a guy's accuracy. So a really cool looking Bills Hard Knocks, but it takes a lot of attention to detail and ability to make those little subtle improvements. And in that Bills Hard Knocks episode, it's really cool too. The coach is like, Josh is also just different than like Mitch Trubisky and I think Kyle Allen is the other QB there. Where if you need Mitch to drop his elbow slot like a half an inch or whatever to improve his mechanics, it takes Mitch like 3 months to make that adjustment and improve his accuracy. Whereas Josh Allen, they're on the field looking at it and say, hey, we got to get that elbow slot down or whatever that little adjustment is. We need your hip to be another 1 degree further towards the right. Josh Allen just makes those little adjustments. Like, he is also just freaky smart on top of the freaky tools. And that's how we've gotten this really nuclear development with him. But anyway, I could sit here and rave about how smart and how physically talented he is and how good he is as a quarterback, but frankly, I don't think you guys clicked on the Bills deep dive to hear, to learn about the idea that Josh Allen is a good quarterback. He's not the problem here. He is the solution. It's really about the rest of this roster and frankly, the coaching staff with McDermott that's got to come together to get this team over the final hump. But the last thing I'll say about Josh Allen is that the same thing I said about Mahomes and the Chiefs deep dive is that this is going to be a fun season because for a while, I think we all just pretty much stayed away from the idea that any other quarterback could be better than Mahomes today. Well, Allen's outplayed Mahomes the last 2 years. Lamar's outplayed him the last 2 years, and Burrow outplayed him last year. So now we're kind of entering this season with a clear-cut, like, top 4 elite, top-shelf quarterback tier. And it's, any number of those guys at this point, I think, could come out of the woodworks at the end of the season kind of with the crown. I'm not quite ready to take that away from Mahomes, but we're damn close to that. So, that's a fun opportunity for Josh Allen as well to kind of, at least for me, to crown him as the best QB in the NFL this season. But as far as the backup, you got Mitch Trubisky there. Let's be honest. If they have to go to Mitch Trubisky for an extended period of time, this team's season is over, even if he's settled in as a quality backup. If they need him to get them through the second half of a game, if Josh Allen has to come out, sure, maybe. But this team's season goes as Josh Allen goes, and everybody knows that he was the MVP for a reason. So I have the Bills ranking second at overall quarterback, third in passing, whereas I did have Joe Burrow ranked ahead of him with the passing grade, but because of that added run game impact where Josh Allen is sensational, ranking third to fourth for the run game impact as well, that does lift him over Joe Burrow for the overall quarterback. And like I said, all 4 of those elite QBs are essentially neck and neck and neck and neck heading into this season. But like I said, it's not about Josh Allen. It is about what the rest of this roster looks like, frankly. So let's get into that aspect of this team. We will next take a look at the pass catchers in Buffalo. So beginning with the offseason changes, where, by the way, I forgot to mention no change at quarterback. So neutral at QB. But as far as the weapons go, they did make some changes at wide receiver. They lose Mac Hollins, a nice wide receiver 4 for them last year, and Amari Cooper out the door as well. He was a surprisingly low-level impact for them. I thought that move was going to really pay off for the Bills, and he just never really settled in. So, call them footnote losses, but not game-changing losses for the Bills. And then their big addition, this front office really likes to excite, Joshua Palmer, the most stale, bland wide receiver 3 in the history of the NFL, maybe. I mean, okay, you're going to give him $10 million. I thought we learned letting Gabe Davis walk that you don't give that player that much money. Not my favorite signing, but it does at least even out, in my opinion, with the losses of Matt Collins and Amari Cooper. So I say neutral at wide receiver. And then at tight end, I said slightly upgraded, but that's more in the blocking game. They draft Jackson Hawes in the 5th round, one of the better blocking tight ends I've evaluated in the last few years, but not going to be much of an impact in terms of a passing weapon. And the only loss there is Quentin Morris. So really kind of status quo for the most part with this group of weapons. And as we turn our attention to breaking this group down further, they're going to be putting a lot of pressure on their first-round pick, Keon Coleman, last year to step up. But as they sit here today, this honestly is not a very impressive group of weapons. I think they're very capable. There's a lot of talented groups of weapons around the NFL. It's probably the deepest position pool in the league outside of running back, straight up. But the Bills came out as the 27th to 30th ranking group of weapons for me for this series. But it's still a C+ grade. It's still a practical group that, paired with a Josh Allen, can still get the job done. It's just, you do kind of wish you had a little bit more explosiveness and help here for Josh Allen. And I think that narrative played into him winning the MVP. It's, you look at this group and it's just nothing really special. But let's give these guys some love and break them down and how they fit within the confines of this offense. So their best wide receiver is their slot wide receiver in Khalil Shakir, who got the contract extension here. He is your literal open up the textbook, Google search, what does a NFL slot wide receiver look like? It's Khalil Shakir. Runs great routes underneath, wins tough catches over the middle of the field, really nice after the catch, savvy to get open against zone coverages, but not someone that you're going to stick on the outside and beat press coverage or stack corners on the outside or frankly stretch the field a whole lot. But as that bona fide stud slot weapon for this team within this offensive scheme that, as we discussed, does open up the quick game and quick hitting passing game quite a lot. He's a legit weapon, and they didn't play him week 18 last year. He missed a couple games as well, so he ended up falling just short of his first career 1,000-yard season. But I do think that changes this year, and this is definitely someone I'm targeting in my fantasy leagues. I know at this point you've all probably done your fantasy drafts, but maybe if you're doing season-long pick'ems on Underdog or Underdog best ball drafts that you can still do here before the season starts, Khalil Shakir's number for higher on receiving yards this year for his season-long selection is 774 yards. I really like that for him. He ended up getting 821 last year, missing 2 games. And that's, I think they've really discovered how he fits and how he works within this offense. So I definitely think Shakir is in a good spot to produce and be a very efficient, productive contributor to this group of weapons and this Bills offense. Now, after him, it just does not blow me away, man. I mean, the Joshua Palmer signing could not get me any less excited as someone rooting for the Bills to get over the hump. And if I were a Bills fan, I mean, this is like going to the ice cream shop with your parents, sending your dad in and saying, hey, get me something exciting in there. He comes back with a vanilla ice cream cone and you're like, what the hell? They had 25 different flavors in there, milkshakes. You could have gotten me anything. Or a vanilla ice cream cone? That's Josh Palmer. I mean, he is a outside, adequate wide receiver 3, nothing more, nothing less. He's going to give you 500, 600 yards. He's going to occasionally win some tough catches. He's a pretty smart player for like scramble drill and like being a chemistry player for back shoulders and that kind of stuff. He's slow, frankly, for a starting receiver. He's not going to provide juice. And $11 million for this player, I think Chargers fans are like, all right, I mean, we'll take our comp pick, sure. Okay, I mean, this literally does nothing for me. I just bring Mac Hollins back. I mean, seriously, I don't really have anything nice to say about this signing. I don't really get it. I just feel like you can find this player for much less. So I'm going to move on. But you have Keon Coleman, who is the excitement. This is, to stick with the ice cream analogy, this is, the mystery flavor of the month that might taste great. I mean, first round pick last year, showed flashes in his first season, but couldn't quite adapt, I think, to the full speed of the NFL game, develop a full chemistry with Josh Allen. Like, he was close to kind of being a key contributor for this team, but never really broke through. And I do think when this team went and got Amari Cooper, it probably just made things a little bit too congested for him to fully break through. So, I mean, this is kind of a Michael Pittman-esque big-bodied wide receiver where he's really, theoretically, very good in the short to intermediate game, running slants, sitting down in zones, helping move the chains, back shoulders to the sideline. And then someone as well that, like, he's not really going to separate vertically, but if you want to say, hey, just run deep, we're going to throw it up to you 50 yards down the field and use that basketball background and go win a tough catch for us when we need a bucket, like, Keon Coleman can really do that. So it's just about consistency and really reaching his ceiling. I don't think he's a bad player. I think as a big-bodied wide receiver 3 in this setup, he's, if nothing else, going to be an adequate option. But got to clean up some of the drops, develop a better chemistry, understand the offense better in terms of being in the right place at the right time as far as when to sit down against zones and, you know, what you're reading and what Josh Allen is reading. Like, they do put a lot of pressure on these wide receivers. It's not fully to the level of like Tom Brady with his offenses and the demands he would put on those receivers to really read out defenses at the same time as him. But there's some similar concepts there within this Joe Brady offense as well. So just a lot of opportunity there. I'm excited to see what he can do here in year 2. I liked him as a prospect, but he's far from a proven commodity for this group of weapons as well. So that's where your upside lies for this group to be more of a top 20 group of weapons. But, you know, we'll continue to talk about the rest of this group. But even if Coleman does break out, let's say he becomes Michael Pittman, you're still not talking about an elite group of weapons, but it's much closer to like 20th than it is, you know, bottom 5 where we've got him right now. Let's finish up the conversation on the rest of these wide receivers, even if, you know, there's other guys higher in the pecking order. You got Curtis Samuel and Elijah Moore. These are kind of those ancillary slot weapons we kind of talked about with Joe Brady's system, where if you're rotating these guys in, these guys can be bubble screen threats. They can work the underneath game. They can be run after catch threats, good guys on crossing routes. Elijah Moore especially can kind of step out and do some stuff. He was a fun signing. Cool to see him make this team. He just hasn't really had the right quarterback play to really break through, but he's also been inconsistent in his own right. So, you know, Elijah Moore and Curtis Samuel are very kind of redundant backups, but they're useful backups. They're some of the better wide receiver 4 and wide receiver 5s in the league. It's just you're not very top heavy with this wide receiver group here in Buffalo. And then Tyrell Shavers made the team, made an unbelievable catch in the preseason. I don't know if he made this team off of that alone. But yeah, they like him, and he's made this team over some other kind of 6th, 7th round picks that they've taken gambles on in recent drafts. So we'll see what they can get from him. I'm not too familiar with his game. But yeah, obviously you have like Dalton Kincaid and James Cook are much bigger parts of this equation than I've led on to this point. Like, these guys are contributors. Dalton Kincaid has settled in as a good receiving tight end. Missed a few games with injury last year, and some Bills fans will say, hey, it's year 3, he's a tight end, the arrow should still be pointing up on him, you're short selling his upside. Okay, I mean, I've got a 78 rating on him as a receiving threat, for example. Yeah, he could probably become a little bit better than that, but frankly, I just don't watch Dalton Kincaid and say, oh my God, that's a game-changing player. I will say I think they've done a really bad job at, like, you know, leaning into using their first round pick here that was supposed to be kind of a math changer for this offense as a half wide receiver, half tight end, doing creative things schematically. Maybe it was the offensive coordinator change that kind of led to this. Joe Brady doesn't necessarily view his role the same as, what was it, Ken Dorsey would have been the OC when they drafted him. So maybe that's what this has been all about. But I don't know, man. I see like a toned down version of Zach Ertz, which gets you, I don't know, Noah Fant, Mike Gesicki-esque player. Like, he's a receiving tight end that can't really put his hand in the dirt and block. If you ask him to put on weight, he's going to lose some of that separation ability. But he can work you underneath. He'll be a weapon for their quick passing game. Let this team down in a big spot. Like, would have been a tough catch on that 4th down against the Chiefs in the playoffs, but first round pick tight end, Josh Allen's trust target. You kind of want him to find that football. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too hard on him, but I think he's a good piece. Like, ideally would be a target 3.5 in an offense. Not someone that you look at and say, man, if Keon Coleman doesn't break out, like, they kind of need Dalton Kincaid to step up. So I just can't really get that excited about Kincaid at this point. I'm sorry, Bills fans. But James Cook, I think, could have a lot of potential personally to, like, become a bigger part of their passing game. Like, you look at his skill set, 38 targets last year. I mean, I would try to get that up at least 50%. Like, get him 60 targets. Like, he has real juice out in space. He did have 258 yards on those 38 targets. So, like, he still contributed. He has had drop issues over the years, but I feel like they got better last year. They were still there. He still dropped 8.6% of his targets. So you want to see further improvement there, but he had a brutal amount of drops in 2023, dropping 12% of his targets. But if you can take another, let's say, 4% drop rate increase for James Cook, he goes from 12% in 2023 to 8.5% this year. Just get that down to a 5% drop rate where you're only dropping 3 passes on 60 targets or whatever. I think that's roughly the right math. I mean, you could really have something closer to like what the Lions get out of like Jahmyr Gibbs. He's not quite as explosive as Jahmyr Gibbs, but of all the backs in the league that, okay, so the Patriots are drafting Travion Henderson, and there's other teams where it's like the idea is, oh, we got to find our Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, James Cook is about as damn close to being able to actually do that at the NFL level as anybody. I mean, he has the elite first step acceleration that Jahmyr Gibbs has, and he's got pretty damn good top speed too. So I would love to see them lean into him a little bit more. And I did put the up arrow on James Cook. I think having paid him that contract, if they want to get the most out of that, squeeze a little bit more out of him on passing downs as opposed to like Ty Johnson. And I get Ty Johnson does some really good stuff, and they'll still work in Ty Johnson because he's just really smart and reliable on third downs. But if you look at this group and say, man, we just don't really have a lot of explosiveness with this group, James Cook is your explosive weapon. I'd love to see this team lean into him a little bit more, and I think this is a smart team that can do that, especially after they paid him that contract. So we'll see where that goes. As far as weapons beyond the guys we've talked about, you do have Dawson Knox. And this is just interesting. Like, the Bills, when they drafted Dalton Kincaid, it was like, man, you kind of just paid Dawson Knox. Like, he's an okay player. But the kind of idea was basically we're going to run a lot of 12 personnel and lean into kind of the mismatch problems of being able to take Dalton Kincaid and line him out in the slot. Well, the Bills were 28th in 12 personnel usage last year. They hardly did it. And part of that is Dawson Knox just has not responded well to the Bills drafting a first-round tight end. He has gotten worse, honestly. So I do wish I could sit here and say, like, yeah, man, they got a good possession tight end here, and then they can run 12 personnel and bring in Dalton Kincaid off the wing where you're limiting his size deficiencies, and then if you want to come out and base to stop that, they can flex Dalton Kincaid outside, and damn, all of a sudden you got to deal with Shakir and Dalton Kincaid as slot wide receivers with just 4 defensive backs out there. Like, I wish I could say that this team has really weaponized that idea, that like some other teams in the league have done a really good job kind of weaponizing 12 personnel in that way. That isn't something I would praise the Bills and Joe Brady for. Right now, it's like, yeah, Dawson Knox is just like one of the better backup tight ends in the league. Not a super instinctive receiver, not a crazy good blocker, but I don't know, he checks a lot of boxes. He's an adequate player to have here. But honestly, I get more excited about Jackson Hawes here for the future. I don't know how much he's going to play this year with Dawson Knox on this team. And again, this team hasn't shown us too much ability to get into 12 personnel and do that kind of stuff. But I just straight up, like, this might sound crazy, but if I'm running 12 personnel with the Bills and we're trying to do all that stuff with that formation to create those problems for defenses, I would rather have Jackson Hawes out there than Dawson Knox because he's such a good blocker. And I think he'll be able to translate that to the league right away. So you put Jackson Hawes in line as an extension of your offensive line, and then you play Kincaid off the wing. You can move Kincaid into the slot. I do think there's a future there if they want to tap into it. And it was a good draft pick in the 5th round. But as a receiving threat, like he's super stiff. He's got bad hands. But when he does catch the ball, he does have kind of that freight train run after catch ability. I compared him to a very underrated overall tight end in Washington in John Bates, who did get a 3-year, $21 million contract extension in Washington. And that's kind of your perfect comp for how you might want to use these guys because Dalton Kincaid has a lot of late career Zach Ertz to his game. So, I'm curious if that's something they watched with the Jaden Daniels offense last year and say, yeah, let's run a little bit 12 personnel and let's see what Jackson Haas can do here. And maybe we can kind of age this out with Dawson Knox. Haas is definitely a fun player for the football junkies that like a little throwback brand of football. But there's your group of weapons. It's definitely not the most explosive, exciting unit for this overall football team. As we saw last year, like it's enough for Josh Allen to tap into and get the most out of and have an effective, like a highly effective passing game. But that's Josh Allen and how special he is. Just doing what he can with a high floor group of weapons like this. And then we'll see if Keon Coleman can take that leap and be, more of a 1A, 1B type here next to Khalil Shakir. That would be big if that could happen. But let's move forward and talk about the backfield more with a lens on the run game. So no change here. They like this group. They stay neutral at running back from their offseason changes. But with James Cook here now for the long haul, getting that contract extension, the Bills have a nice ranking at running back. They rank 12th to 17th. It's a very effective backfield, just as we saw last year. I think James Cook, right in that kind of like 10 to 12 range of top running backs in the NFL, if you put together a list, feels about right to me. And honestly, I never thought that was going to happen with James Cook. And maybe I'm still shortchanging him. We'll see if he can keep climbing these rankings for me. But just like coming out of Georgia, I thought he was a true scat back, like never really going to take over a backfield or develop the type of vision that he needed to develop to become the kind of 1A back that he is here in Buffalo. And just a total tip of the cap to James Cook. Like he has absolutely developed as a runner, and Georgia, I think, probably just misused him a lot too. That probably didn't help, but yeah, like he's turned into a guy with really good vision. A lot of his runs remind me of like Aaron Jones, where he's just kind of carving through the defense, and you're like, man, that was a savvy run by James Cook. But it helps when you have some of the best acceleration of any back in the league. And then when he's got that explosiveness, he's able to run through a lot of arm tackles too. He doesn't have true power, but he's a tough guy to get down in space because of that quick momentum he's able to generate from his lower half. And then he's got the big playability as well. He can generate those explosive runs. And yeah, hopefully we'll get a little bit more out of him. Catching passes out of the backfield too would be nice, but very impressed by James Cook. I would have paid him if I'm the Bills. I think the running back market is rising. We're going to start to see these backs getting a lot more money than they've gotten over the last 4 or 5 years, I think. But I don't think the league has fully accepted kind of the jump in the market that Saquon Barkley created. I think when Bijan Robinson's contract is up, I think that'll open up the floodgates. But $11.5 million a year for James Cook for the next 4 years, I would absolutely have done that for the Bills. And it's good. It's solid money for James Cook, but it's I think an even better deal for the Buffalo Bills here. So I think he's going to have a very good year as a contributor to this backfield. And then a part of the reason I said, like, I don't know if James Cook will like necessarily keep climbing and be like a top 5, 6, 7 running back in the league. A big part of that is he is like a little bit more, I don't want to say one-dimensional, but limited in the sense of like his size and short yardage situations, or if you want that kind of bruiser to pound out games, this team does beat down on bad teams a lot. And James Cook is a smaller back. You probably don't want James Cook getting those kind of meaningless 18th, 19th, 24th touches in a football game. Like, I think this team does a really good job recognizing any shortcomings of James Cook and leaning into a Ray Davis, who was such a like just perfect mid-round running back draft pick. He's a very solid bruising back, good vision, good overall traits for a bigger guy, but just like elite character dude. Just the perfect complement to James Cook. Nothing special. If James Cook goes down, I don't expect Ray Davis is going to like break through as a superstar or anything like that. But I just really like how these guys are set up and how their skill sets play off of each other. And then Ty Johnson is the only other back on this team. He's got a little bit of juice, but he's a true backup to James Cook in the run game. But yeah, as a pass catcher, they'll definitely get him going. And then the other part of this backfield and the rushing threats is Josh Allen. Like, I think it's pretty well documented at this point. Like, he is an amazing rushing threat with power and acceleration and speed. And just like some of these fourth and short situations that they give him the ball, his creativity to just find a way when they're, even if the defense is in the right position, his ability to put on a stiff arm or just jump over you or just drag you the extra yard, and his spatial awareness that is obviously elite with the quarterback he is, to pick up those first downs. It's unbelievable. And it's such a game changer for this Bills team. It's just so ironic that it was a 4th and inches that ended this team's season or put them in such a tough spot in that game. But it's definitely a math changer for this Bills run game and needs to be discussed. Just how big of an impact Josh Allen is, because we're going to go to this offensive line here. It's a good offensive line, but it's not an elite one. It's a good group of running backs, but it's not an elite group of running backs. Yet the Bills were 4th in offensive rushing DVOA. That's the Josh Allen factor right there, and the math being changed to open things up for guys like James Cook and even the offensive line, helping them get those numbers advantages. It's the real deal, man. There's a reason we include that as a big factor in this series, and even in our quarterback rankings, as we kind of hit on earlier. But yeah, let's talk about this offensive line, our last position group for the offense. And yet again, like, kind of status quo for the offense. They know that this offense is elite, and they needed to spend their resources on the defense, as we will get to. But with the offensive line, really no changes. They spent a 6th-round pick on the developmental Chase Lunt, and they draft nobody. So staying neutral at offensive line, and you can kind of look back at the offseason changes there, and it's like, yeah, I mean, Josh Palmer was their big splash on offense. They drafted fun blocking tight end in the 5th round, and it's kind of about it. Just running it back here, and nothing wrong with that with what they had to work with last year. But yes, this offensive line is a really nice, really balanced offensive line. And I know I said earlier that it's not an amazing offensive line. I will stand by that. Like, they do come in as my 6th overall ranked offensive line. I think, yes, it's a good unit, but that's also an indictment of the fact that, like, there just aren't that many amazing offensive lines in the league. When you have a really good, well-balanced unit like this that gets B grades across the board for me here in this series, you're going to end up with a top 10 good offensive line like this that ranks 6th. They're 6th to 8th in pass blocking, 7th in run blocking. So just super balanced and reliable, even if they don't necessarily blow you away. And it is another example of how this is a weak link position. And the fact that this offensive line does not have a weak link also carries a lot of weight there. But I do, before we even get into the players, have to give a shout out to their offensive line coach, Aaron Cromer, who I want to say was hired in 2022. And that's when this Bills offensive line really turned a corner. And their ability to find some of these guys and get more than you would expect for what they've had to invest in them is so impressive. Deion Dawkins was here, but other than that, Spencer Brown was a 3rd-round pick. David Edwards, they plucked up for nothing on a really smart free agent contract. They gave him a 2-year, $6 million deal last offseason because he had fallen off after being a pretty solid guard for the Rams like 4 years ago. But he's bounced back here. Connor McGovern wasn't even really a full-time starter when they signed him out of Dallas. And then a 2nd-round pick in Osiris Torrance as well is still trying to come along. But yeah, Aaron Cromer deserves a shout-out. Like, we mention a lot of the game's best O-line coaches quite often in this series, whether it's Bill Callahan or Jeff Stoutland, Adam Stenovich, Clayton Adams. Aaron Cromer, absolutely a massive asset for this Bills team. And by the way, yet another reason to go get an offensive coach, because we're starting to see a trend where teams are hiring an offensive head coach and then using that offensive coordinator vacancy to go steal a really good O-line coach from someone. God forbid someone hires Joe Brady and then he takes Aaron Cromer with him to be his offensive coordinator. That is not a far-fetched concept. So we'll, again, see how that all plays out. But he has done an outstanding job with this team this is not a group invested into the level that you would expect to be our 6th ranking offensive line here, yet here we are. Now, I think that does leave us with a shorter conversation with these players individually, but we'll go through them nonetheless here. So Deion Dawkins, their franchise left tackle, I've enjoyed seeing him on Hard Knocks. Just seems like such a fun dude. I've heard praise about him at the O-Line Masterminds Clinic as well that goes on every summer. But yeah, he's a rock star pass protector. He's not an unbelievable athlete. He's not this game-changing run blocker, but he's very assignment sound and tough there. So you love what you got in Dawkins at left tackle. He has, continued to play at a high level and hasn't shown really signs of regression even into his 30s here. So you love that. We kind of mentioned David Edwards, has been an awesome reclamation project here, was available essentially for nothing, and just the belief by the Bills to say, no, we're not going to give you a 1-year vet minimum deal. We're going to give you 2 years because we think you're going to play pretty well here, and we don't have to pay you $13 million after you break back out. And he's not some superstar or anything, but as we know, solid, balanced, tough guards like David Edwards that just prevent you from having a weak link. These guys do get $13-14 million on the open market in today's game. Shit, he's a better player than Aaron Banks that got $19 million from the Green Bay Packers. But, he's not nearly the shit or get off the pot narrative driver that Joe Brady leaving after this year is, but he is now on the 2nd year of that cheap deal. They are going to have to pay him a pretty good chunk of change if they're going to keep him, or maybe they'll replace him with some of these other interesting interior O-line guys because they've developed guys so well. But what I'm getting at is it's very nice that they have him for $3 million this year. That is a huge steal in terms of value. Very nice overall player, even if he doesn't have the dominant physical traits to be considered a Pro Bowler or anything like that. But you got Connor McGovern next to him. Similar concept. They took him from Dallas. He was kind of a 6th offensive lineman for them. He struggled to get playing time because that was such a great Dallas interior offensive line at the time, but was a mid-round pick out of Penn State. Good job by the pro scouting department and Aaron Cromer to take a guy like this, bring him in, really on the cheap, $7 million a year, started as a guard, played well in 2023, and then it was valiant that he was able to step into center and be a pretty damn solid center as well. Kind of same idea as a David Edwards where, okay, he's not this super athlete. I think he is pretty athletic, but, not this game-changing center or anything like that, but very balanced, very tough, all of, checks every box you could want from a starting center at this point. He is also, though, in the last year of his contract. So, again, great to have them right now. These guys are going to get more expensive here for the Bills very quickly because they have played very solid starters. And then Osiris Torrance, you're hoping he can take that step here in year 3. Some guys at offensive line just come along a little bit slower. Some guys never come along. I think Osiris Torrance, that is one of the hardest names to say 3 times fast in the league. But he's been an adequate player because he is strong as hell, tough as shit, won't take no for an answer in the trenches, but in terms of technique and being assignment sound and leaning on blocks and losing his feet in pass protection at times, there's just been some games that are a lot worse than others for him. So it's been an inconsistent start to his career, but now in year 3 with a great O-line coach, hopefully he can take a big step here in year 3. And if he can do that, then paired with maybe some upside that we'll talk about with Spencer Brown still to come, if that could turn into more of a superstar right tackle, right guard duo, you could go from what is already a very good offensive line to having more of a game-breaking elite offensive line if those guys can really take those leaps forward. But even if they are what they are now, you still have a very solid right guard and right tackle here, obviously with Spencer Brown. But he is the pinnacle of their ability to develop offensive linemen. He was a hyper-raw 3rd-round pick that, frankly, I'll say it, he sucked out the gate. And it was not looking like this was going to work out. But they stayed patient. He is the crowning example of why development is a thing. Not everybody's going to just step into the league and be good right away. But if you take the right traits with the right work ethic and the right coaching, it can really land in a good spot. And Spencer Brown has really emerged as one of the best right tackles in the NFL. And I do still have the up arrow on him because he's gotten better every single year. And until he stops getting better, whether it's pass blocking efficiency or reducing his number of poorly graded runs in the run game, as he's done every single year, essentially until he stops developing, I'm not going to bet against him to keep getting better every single year. Because a guy with his traits, the sky is the limit. And I'm not saying he's Lane Johnson. Lane was the 4th overall pick, and he didn't suck out the gate in the way that Spencer Brown did. But Brown was a little bit more of a late bloomer, having to go through Northern Iowa and stuff. But I'm just saying this, like, when I look at Spencer Brown, his frame, his build, the way he moves, and the way he's developed, I mean, Lane Johnson has played the best football of his career at ages 33, 34, and 35. So I'm just drawing some parallels there. Like, Spencer Brown, just as Lane Johnson has throughout his career, can continue to get better and better and better and better. He is not like some other tackles that we've talked about in this series, even right here in this offensive line, like a Deion Dawkins, a little bit more physically limited, has kind of stalled out as just a really good tackle. But some other guys, like, as much as I love like Zach Tom, like, he doesn't have the size profile. You look at maybe a guy like Orlando Brown, doesn't have the athletic profile. There's no limitations to Spencer Brown's ceiling and development. So there is absolutely a world where he takes another step forward, and we're talking about him closer to the elite tackles in the game. And that would also help propel this offensive line even further as well, as far as the rankings are concerned. So, it's not that there's no upside here. It's just you're counting on already solid and good players to develop even further, which doesn't always happen. But just a very good balanced offensive line in general, man. Now, as far as the depth is concerned, I would be worried about their tackle depth quite a lot, frankly, if they had an injury there. Ryan Vandemark, don't want to have to go to him. You've got Tylen Grable, who is starting the season injured, but I think they're expecting him back, but you don't want to have to go to him. Just a couple of guys in Vandemark who has not played well when he's been out there, and Grable, he did start that Week 18 game against New England, which is just a pathetic edge group last year, so I don't want to put too much into it, but he didn't allow pressure in that Week 18 start, so he at least played well when he got out there. He was a 6th-round pick in 2024, and we know this team has developed offensive linemen, so maybe there's something there, but maybe not, and then a 6th-round pick in Chase Lunt that I'm just not a big believer in. I hate that size profile of being 6'7.5", 6'8", as he is, with short arms. I don't think that's a combination that works for being an NFL offensive lineman. You're granting inside leverage and don't have the arm length to counter it. It's just really hard to survive in that world. So I frankly wouldn't have drafted him, but we'll see. Maybe they see something I don't. But I do like their interior kind of developmental options. Like, they have Alec Anderson, undrafted out of UCLA in 2022. But it's impressive that he's stuck around, and they kind of gave him the Connor McGovern treatment, where he's been used as a 6th offensive lineman. And I'm not able to pull the numbers, but I would certainly wager that he led the NFL in whatever gets charted as like 6th offensive lineman formations. And they'll kind of weaponize him in that sense. So that's why he does show up for those. Looking at the graphic there as a big impact, honestly, to the skill player blockers, whereas the rest of these guys don't give you too much. But he's going to play, and then he also started Week 18, and he also played very well against New England. So I think there's something there. And given what we said about the fact that Edwards and McGovern are pending free agents, wouldn't be surprised if Alec Anderson ends up getting the nod as a starter in 2026. But we'll see. And then they do still have Cedric Van Pran, who unfortunately missed all of camp for an injury. But I liked him as a late round pick out of Georgia. I think he's got just really good natural athleticism for an interior offensive lineman, whether that's a center or a guard. Has a lot of development to do and a lot of bulking up to do, but he does end up making this team and as healthy as we head into the start of the season, or should be. So Well, I'm definitely interested to see if we can get some more playing time from him. He also started week 18, and he did give up a few pressures, but that's really the extent of his playing time to this point. So definitely not giving up on him after the first start of his career, basically. But there's your offensive line and your Bills offense overall, so shouldn't be too much of a surprise here. They came out as my third ranking overall offense, third in passing game, despite being, relatively lackluster with the weapons. But you got a good O-line and great coaching and an elite quarterback. Just as we saw last year, you're still going to be able to sling the damn rock. And then they come out fourth for overall run game as well. So they are outstanding on this side of the ball. This is the engine that drives this Bills team. But the hope is, you would think that Sean McDermott's defense can carry their weight this year. And this is going to turn into a pretty interesting conversation, I think, because there's a lot of moving parts. And like I said, a lot of pressure on McDermott to, get this to play at least at the level of defense that they need to win a Super Bowl, given how good their offense is. And I don't know if they quite were there last year, but let's get into it. So we're going to start with the defensive line. And like I said, there's a lot of shakeup with this defense, really at every level. But that definitely starts on the defensive line, both on the interior and at edge. So on the interior, players on the way out, not a lot, just Austin Johnson, who was a rotational DT that played 28% of snaps. Really no losses there for the interior, if we're being honest. But in terms of upgrades, it's like dart throws and flyers, right? It's Larry Ogunjobi in free agency on a 1-year, $6 million deal, who's going to be suspended for 6 games. It's a second-round pick in the athletic TJ Sanders and a fourth-round pick in Deone Walker. All like decent-sized additions that, in sum, I said that the interior of the defensive line from this offseason is slightly upgraded and hopefully just fully upgraded, depending on what they can get from those rookies. But for now, slightly upgraded on the interior. And then on the edge, I also said slightly upgraded. A lot of movement here. So they have 3 players on the outs. Von Miller was a highly efficient pass rusher. Man finished with 32 pressures, playing just 26% of snaps last year in a situational pass rush role in 13 games. Was much more efficient than I thought he would be at 35 years old. But the Commanders liked what they saw there. They ended up signing him after the Bills did have to release him. I mean, they were overpaying him to be in that type of role. But also some rotational pieces, Dwayne Smoot and Casey Toohill, not so much to say there. But I do think Von Miller, dude was super efficient and was third on this team in pressures last year, despite only playing a quarter of their snaps. So that is a loss, but they're hoping to supplement that by getting Joey Bosa. Similar idea with that veteran pass rusher, though, as we'll discuss with him, his role is going to be a little bit different, but certainly a health risk type of signing there, but a fun signing if you're a Bills fan, for sure. He's definitely going to be a wild card for this team, as you would expect. But Michael Hoyt as well also faces a 6-game suspension. It came out that they knew one of them was going to be suspended and they knew one wasn't. I don't think it got revealed which one they knew was going to be suspended, but certainly I don't think the plan was to sign 2 of their 4 or 5 notable free agent signings. 2 of them are going to miss over a third of the regular season. Not the end of the world, but certainly not ideal. But yeah, Michael Hoyt is a nice signing. And then they also spent a 3rd-round pick on Landon Jackson. So a lot of movement there. Again, slightly upgraded, both on the edge and the interior, with a lot of potential too. Potential that we'll get into here, but definitely that potential leads to me putting that wild card icon on this defensive line, basically saying, this could go one way or another. There's downside here for this D-line to hold this team back, but there's upside for this team if they can hit some green lights for this D-line to help this defense get over the hump a little bit here. But let's start on the edge with Gregory Rousseau. He is not a part of the wild card factor here. I think we know quite well what we're getting in Gregory Rousseau. Now, I think you could argue he's shown some incremental growth every year and that the arrow should be pointing up on him. We'll see. I've said this before. I don't like to just put the up arrow on everybody. I feel pretty confident saying Gregory Rousseau is, as we have him rated here, as a very good kind of high-end number 2 edge. not a consistent game changer, not someone you're happy with being your best defensive lineman. If you could put one of those types of guys next to a Gregory Rousseau, though, you would love him. And unfortunately for the Bills, that is where the Bills lie. Gregory Rousseau, I think, is this team's best defensive lineman. And by the way, that kind of math leaves the Bills as our 25th overall defensive line. They rank 17th to 21st for pass rush, 24th to 28th for D-line run defense. But as we'll continue to talk about this defensive line, it's not that it's a bad unit, but there are a lot of good defensive lines in the league. And anytime you're talking about a guy like Rousseau, who ideally would be a 2, having to be your 1, it's just not going to put you in the most advantageous situation relative to the rest of the league. But again, that does not mean that the Bills are dead to rights here. He's a very good floor raiser for this D-line. He's a 3-down defensive lineman. He can play as many as 55, 60 snaps in a game if you need to ask him to do that. You don't want to do that every week, but you might have to. And he's going to shut down the run on early downs. He's going to hold that hard edge. And as a pass rusher, he does a relatively good job, like winning one-on-ones and disrupting the quarterback. He's got some power. He's developed a really nice kind of inside-outside Euro step swim move to kind of keep you guessing there, which direction he's going to hit you from. So he can beat you to the inside shoulder, he can beat you to the outside shoulder, and he can go through you. I talk about this in draft season a lot. There's really 4 ways to win as an edge rusher. The 3 ways we just described: inside shoulder, outside shoulder, through a guy. And then there's like the corner. There's a difference between the outside shoulder and the corner. Corner is like you really got that speed and bend to get off, to force a tackle, to drop deep and really, seal that corner. Whereas beating the outside shoulder, it's like, ooh, I faked you inside and I'm just, slipping past your outside shoulder. There's definitely a difference in skill set between being able to really corner as an edge rusher versus just beating the outside shoulder with rips and Euro steps and swipes, as Greg Rousseau does. But he's got 3 of the 4 boxes checked, and he can absolutely win as a rusher that way. But that lack of the 4th piece is probably the missing element for, like, can he turn into a, not even tier 1 guy, but maybe like a Danielle Hunter, or those few really good years we saw from Rashawn Gary, for example. Those being similar style rushers that also have that elite speed cornering threat as well that Rousseau's probably missing. But ultimately, very good player. And then you go to the opposite edge, and it's a very fun but polarizing conversation with Joey Bosa. On paper, as we sit here today, heading into week 1 with Joey Bosa mostly healthy. I mean, I know he dealt with something early in camp, but I think he is good to go here, at least in week 1. It's exciting, but that's every Chargers season for the last 5 years. It's like, oh, this is the year Joey Bosa's going to stay healthy and be Joey Bosa again. I just don't know if that guy's coming back, man. And yes, he gets hurt, he misses time, he ends up unavailable, but even when he's played now the last couple of years, he has not been the same efficient, dominant player that he was earlier in his career. And the Chargers knew this. That's why they released him. So it's one of these deals where, like, I agree with the process. I would have signed Joey Bosa if I'm the Bills, because if this hits, maybe there is a 5-10% chance that you're getting that actual number 1 guy that this D-line has been missing really in this era, right? In the Josh Allen era. They haven't had a number 1. Like, maybe a couple weeks of Von Miller, but that signing obviously backfired. But, like, yeah, maybe Joey Bosa can get healthy and stay healthy, and at 30 years old now, which the age itself isn't a death sentence for Joey. It's just, it's been all of these injuries accumulating. You look at the last 3 years, snaps played, 165 in 2022, 320 in 2023, and 457 last year. And last year, again, when he did play, you did not see the same efficiency numbers. So he is the absolute definition of a wild card signing, a boomer bust, like, low risk, high reward type of signing. I have no issue with them bringing in Joey Bosa. It's just like, if you're talking about this on that sort of expectations curve that we sometimes talk about with quarterbacks, but like, okay, yeah, there's a 5 or 10% chance that you're getting a true number one edge rusher. But if you talk about the other 80% of outcomes, like that medium range is what Bosa was last year, honestly. A guy that probably plays somewhere from 8 to 12 games and is like an okay, starting caliber, like good number two guy from an efficiency standpoint. Like, again, not only does he have to stay healthy, but he has to prove that he can be the old Joey Bosa again to hit that 5 to 10% range of outcomes. And then you've got your like 10% outcome, which is the 2022 season for him, which is 3 weeks in, he's done for the year. So trying to sit here and tell you what they're going to get from him is very tough to do. But I think looking at that kind of bell curve analogy for what to expect from him does make sense. But only time will tell with what they get from him. And then after him, you've got some interesting conversations too with the edge group. Michael Hoyt is going to be suspended for the first 6 games, but he's a really good number 3 edge rusher. I like him as a signing there. They give him like $7 million a year for 3 years. He's a big-bodied edge guy. He plays at like 300 pounds. I like that he's going to be able to put his hand in the dirt more in this Bills defense. That'll be fun to see because he has infamously been a stand-up edge linebacker that has, I'm not even kidding you, at 300 pounds as an edge rusher, been in the top 5 of coverage snaps for edge rushers over the last like 3 years in those Rams defenses. So the scheme change will be interesting for him. He's a really athletic guy. Doesn't have like this huge breadth of pass rush moves or anything, but I think an opportunity to put his hand in the dirt and see what he can do in a 4-2 system is fascinating. So I think considering if the Bills are smart about this, they're not going to play Joey Bosa 50, 60 snaps a game. I don't think he's quite like Von Miller where you're just putting him out there on third downs and third downs only, really. I think it's more of a drive-by-drive type of deal with Joey Bosa because a big part of Bosa's game is being able to defend the run off the edge with his size. But generally speaking, Michael Hoyt and AJ Epinesa as well, like these are adequate edge 3, edge 4 pieces that can hopefully limit Joey Bosa's exposure to injury so that you can put yourself in a best likelihood situation that Bosa can be the best version of himself in January when you really need him. So I think that's ultimately the plan once Hoyt comes off of suspension. And even when Hoyt is suspended, I think we see a good bit of AJ Epinesa, eating up 30, 35 snaps as an innings eater. But just not an efficient player in any regard. I don't really have too much to add on AJ Epinesa at this point, but as an edge 4, that's fine. I have no complaints. But then you still have some interesting guys to talk about with the edge group that have some potential here. Landon Jackson, 3rd-round pick out of Arkansas. Hyper raw, doesn't really know what he's doing yet, but has all the length, get-off traits like that you would look for in a starting edge rusher in the league. He's kind of like a poor man's Greg Rousseau for what he was coming out. But it's a good spot where they can develop him. He gets to learn not just from the coaches, but from Joey Bosa and getting Greg Rousseau's ear as well, who was quite raw coming out. Haven't played just 1 year at Miami, but Jackson was an interesting watch, not just on film, but this all showed up at the Senior Bowl too. But his film showed a guy that I think has a fascination and an interest in being able to win with like every pass rush move in the book. But his problem is he's not efficient with any of those moves, whether it's a spin move or landing his bull rush or a rip move or a cross chop, like you name it, spin moves, like the whole repertoire of pass rushing moves. He's got the physical build to do that, to do anything. And he knows that. And he tried a bunch of stuff, but it just wasn't effective. And you even saw that at the Senior Bowl, where the first couple of practices, I saw Landon Jackson spin, he tried a spin move and just spun in place and it did nothing. And you saw him trying a bunch of stuff with his hands and going nowhere with it. And then on the 3rd day of practice, he just got into bull rush and rip move and speed rush around the corner and started to win a little bit more. And it's okay, you go to kind of the go-to easy button moves, and we know the traits are in there. You can beat NFL level of competition, but now it's about developing that pass rush plan and putting everything together. And really not many people better than Joey Bosa to teach you when to use what move, how to win with certain moves. So I'm very interested in Landon Jackson. Probably not getting anything from him this year, But if you're looking for some of those like dream scenarios, your Josh Sweats and even like Daniil Hunter as third round picks that were just hyper raw coming out that maybe they could click and be, really high end pass rushers, that is a possible outcome for Landon Jackson. So I think it was a fun draft pick. We'll see where it goes. And then Javon Solomon too is a fun like pass rush specialist. He's a unique body profile with a really good first step. He's shorter and wins with easy leverage, getting under guys. A tough block, and he had some efficient moments last year in limited playing time, and he even made some splash plays against the run too, which I didn't think was in his game. So he's tough, and he's gonna give it his all, and he ended up making this team despite the depth they have in place there. So another guy to keep an eye on there. It's a very, very deep edge group, and it's a deep interior D-line that we got to talk about too, but this has kind of been the Bills' story, is depth but not top heaviness, for lack of a better term. But let's talk about the interior D-line. So you got Ed Oliver is your number one pass rusher, and he's another guy that, hasn't quite been the superstar that you might have hoped he could have been coming out of Houston. You just don't find interior D linemen that can move the way that Ed Oliver can. But he's turned into a very good, interior D-line pass rush really oriented player. For the last 3 years, he's probably been in the kind of top 12 or so of interior pass rushers. So he's definitely the other guy you're counting on to still get this as like a top 20 pass rush in the NFL, right? Like, even if we've had some questions about this unit, like you can certainly do worse than Ed Oliver and Greg Rousseau, but as we've discussed, you can do better and find superstar players that can really change the math for you. Ed Oliver's more of a good player that frankly, he's streaky and kind of, I don't know if I want to call him matchup dependent, because it's not like he can only win with power or can only win with speed. Like, he wins with a little bit of everything, but he does seem to be one of these guys that is streaky for one reason or another. He has 3-week stretches where you're like, damn, is that Oliver finally breaking through as a superstar or someone that drew Aaron Donald comps coming out of college? And then he'll just disappear for a month. I don't have a great explanation for that. But it's definitely reflected in his career production at this point. I don't know if there's a way to break that trend or not. Maybe he can still get better as a still relatively young veteran. But the other thing with him too that kind of holds him back is he just is a liability against the run. He gets detonated by double teams, and it's going to happen when you play D tackle undersized and you try to shoot gaps, and he kind of focuses on the pass rushing element. But that holds back the overall D-line rankings here, right? Like, I will reiterate these rankings. I have them with a pretty damn solid pass rush, 17th to 21st. Obviously, Ed Oliver and Greg Rousseau doing most of the heavy lifting there. But the D-line run defense ranks in the bottom third of the league, 24th to 28th there. Having Ed Oliver as one of your starting D tackles is going to hurt your run defense. He just doesn't really command the point of attack as a defensive tackle. But the thing is here, and really why this defensive line doesn't rank too much higher and why this is such a wild card unit, is everything after Ed Oliver is also a major question mark. So you got Daquan Jones next to him. Nice player, but a nice 34-year-old player that regressed after a serious injury in 2023. So that's kind of where you're at with him. Like, at 6'4", 320 pounds, he can take on some double teams. He can do a lot of the dirty work that Ed Oliver just can't, like straight up can't. But can you depend on him to do that for an 18-game season and then into the playoffs as well? And when they had to do that last year, frankly, he just wasn't as good. Massive drop-off in run stops, missed tackle rate, and just way more bad reps against the run than we saw from a 32-year-old Daquan Jones a couple of years ago, when he kind of broke out for the Bills as kind of a late-stage star player, but that was short-lived. So it's pretty hard to imagine a big bounce-back, heavy contribution season from Daquan Jones. And then you get into the depth and other options. I think you talk about TJ Sanders next, as Larry Ogunjobi is suspended. Sanders is an interesting prospect. I think they took him a little bit early, and they traded up to get him. big price. They give up 2 second-round picks and a 4th-round pick to move up 15 spots to grab him. Okay, I mean, that's an aggressive move for the Bills here. They clearly really like him, and he's going to play with that. And he has the traits to return dividends on that, but it's a pretty, like, if you want to stick with the bell curve analogy, like, you kind of have to hit that 5 to 10% range of outcomes on his development to get that. I mean, I'll just say it, there are athletic, pass rush oriented prospects available in every draft in that 2nd to 3rd round range that are pretty damn close to what TJ Sanders was. I don't think he was such a special prospect that the Bills had to leverage that many picks to go get him. But it doesn't mean that, again, that this can't work out. It's just, man, it's a lot to ask of him. But he is a really quick athlete. He's got a nice bull rush, which I love that that's in there. And he's really good at kind of lining up as a 3 technique and crossing your face and winning with quickness. But he wasn't super efficient as a rusher. It was more of like, man, when he wins, he wins. But he would disappear at times. And he also, like, he's very similar to Ed Oliver, where he lacks that sand in the pants. He's not going to help you in run defense. And, you know, it's fine if he's going to be kind of a DT3 with Ed Oliver obviously being a starter, and you're going to have kind of a true run defense type like a Daquan Jones, and then you're going to rotate Sanders in for pass rushing downs. That's fine. Again, like, am I giving up 2 second-round picks and a 4th-round pick for that guy? I'm personally not, but what I'm getting at here is I don't really see this working out for them for him to start next to Ed Oliver unless he makes massive improvements as a run defender. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're giving up that much to go take him 41st overall, that's kind of saying we want you to emerge as a 3-down starter for us. And it's not that he might not be able to do that, but is that best for the Bills next to Ed Oliver, and you just have the worst run defending duo of interior D linemen in the league? And maybe he can reshape his body and turn into a better run defender, but then how much are you losing juice-wise as a pass rusher? So I don't know. I was skeptical of just how aggressive they were to get him, but that doesn't mean he can't make an impact and give them more of a pass rushing complement to Ed Oliver than they've had here, and that he can't be a useful player. So I don't want to just completely slam this. Like, he was a good prospect. It just comes with some added context. So he obviously contributes to the wild card equation here. If he can be a slam dunk 2nd-round pick, if they can prove to be right for their aggressiveness to go get him in the way that they did, that would be huge to add another kind of disruptive, game-changing force of a pass rusher. Because the best version of TJ Sanders, the best possible outcome, is maybe something like another Ed Oliver, which, at least for pass rushing downs, I can get behind having 2 Ed Olivers on the interior. But then after Sanders and after the 6-game suspension, Larry Ogunjobi will step in a, kind of innings eater, I'll stick with that term, role for the D-line. He can play early downs, he can play later downs, put him out there for a drive, take Ed Oliver off for a set of chains, whatever it is. Like, he can do a little bit of everything as long as you're not asking him to be like a run-stuffing nose tackle or anything like that. He's kind of a balanced 3-tech in there, decent enough veteran signing, but nothing to get too razzed up about. But then there's another very fascinating rookie amidst these other 2 guys that's just super fascinating. Deone Walker is a really fun 4th-round pick and such a unique player with a completely unique play style. I really encourage you guys to go back to my interior defensive line rankings where we spent a good, 6, 7, 8 minutes on Deone Walker. But essentially, I compared him, my literal pro comp that we put down in the draft guide and in that video was a dancing bear. And funny enough, I think it was either Ed Oliver or Dion Dawkins said in a quote a few weeks ago, Deone Walker is like a dancing bear. It really is accurate for how he plays. He's 6'7", 330 pounds. He is the most hysterical size that you could find from a defensive tackle. And then the other thing is, like, he's not this slow run stuffing nose tackle at this size. His play style is actually on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. He's got these tiny calves and he plays with a ton of quickness. And he basically does what you wouldn't teach a 6'7" defensive tackle to do, and just stands straight up and tries to win with finesse. Swim moves, swipes, and just trying to cross guys' face. But where Deone Walker doesn't get a lot of credit is he actually plays with really good core strength and contact balance, which we usually use that term for running backs, but it's really important for pass rushers as well, where you've got offensive linemen, shoving their hands into you, pushing you in different directions, trying to displace you within your pass rush or as a run defender. Well, when guys would punch Deone Walker, he wouldn't really move, and he was able to kind of just keep playing through that contact. And then you pair that with the fact that he was playing through a back injury in his final season, his junior year at Kentucky. He headed into the year with top 10 draft pick expectations. He had really good tape in his first 2 years, stood out to me as a true freshman in the SEC. And then he just had an okay but quiet third season, and he ends up falling to the top of the fourth round of the draft. But basically, my take on Deone Walker is you can't put a player rating on him as a rookie. This is either going to work or it's not. This is one of the most unique players at any position you've ever seen. And I don't think you draft him and try to ask him to change the way he plays, because at his play style, it was really effective, honestly, against SEC competition. I know that efficiency dropped off in his final year again. He had that back injury. But that's a whole nother reason why it's hard to know exactly what you're getting from him, because how much was the back injury slowing him down? If he was fully healthy, would he have just been a top 10 pick that the Bills just took in the fourth round rather? So just the wild card of wild cards in this draft among prospects, a true dart throw on upside. And in the fourth round, I love that draft pick. But knowing what we're getting from him is really hard to say, because there's another world of this where against NFL competition, that contact balance doesn't show up as much. He's standing up. Guys are locking into his pads against much better, much stronger, more technically sound athletes. And he's just kind of flailing around, not really doing much, not generating push, and just sucks. This guy could be brutal and horrible at the NFL level, or he could be a game-changing problem. Very excited to watch him one way or another. And then the last D lineman that made this team, they're keeping a lot of guys. That's what the Bills do. And again, 2 of these guys are suspended, but Dwayne Carter, he might get some playing time early when Ogunjobi is hurt, and that could be an opportunity for him to show a little bit more of something than he did in his rookie season, but not to take draft victory laps too early or anything, but I definitely thought he was a reach in the third round, and he struggled when he played last year. So, he just has to add play strength. If he can take a big leap in play strength without jeopardizing his good athleticism, we can start to get somewhere with him. We'll see where he's at, because I think he does get some playing time early. But when Ogunjobi's off the suspension, wouldn't be surprised if he ends up back. He was a third-round pick last year. You probably don't practice squad him, but yeah, hard to expect too much from him. But yeah, there's your D-line. It's kind of all over the place. I think their process is pretty sound. It's just they're coming from a place where outside of Ed Oliver and Greg Rousseau, they really didn't have anything to work with last year. So they're taking a bunch of flyers on vets getting suspended, vets taking PEDs and getting suspended. Sometimes that can help these vets out a little bit. Let's be honest about it. You got 3 kind of interesting, really boomer bust type of D-line draft prospects. All 3 of those guys, Jackson, Sanders, and Walker, I would describe as boomer bust types of prospects. If you could just get a couple green lights there, you're going to be in a much better spot than they were last year, but it's no guarantee that they do. So obviously, as we're talking about, where this team needs to hit those green lights, where those wild card pivotal factors lie, that conversation we just had on this D-line is the center of it all. But frankly, as we continue to go through the rest of this defense, that narrative continues really on this side of the ball all the way through. So at linebacker here, you look at their offseason changes, and on paper, they upgraded. Their only loss is Balin Spector, who hardly played last year and didn't play well when he did. And they returned Matt Milano from injury, who tried to give it a go late last season through what was supposed to be a season-ending shoulder injury. Valiant of him to come back, but he wasn't an asset for this team when he got back out there. But just 30 years old, he comes back on the final year of his contract. And then they also sign Shaq Thompson. Fun flyer on a guy that has had some bad injury luck the last couple of years. So on paper, it's upgraded, but obviously, even before we break these guys down, kind of the narratives on those guys, both Matt Milano and Shaq Thompson, very injury-centric conversations with those guys. But let's start this conversation off with Matt Milano, who's going to resume as this team's number one linebacker. Bills fans always get so mad at me because Terrell Bernard wears the green dot and he's the Mike and all this stuff. Like, it doesn't matter. This team played base defense 3% of the time. You are going to be out there with a two linebacker defense 97% of the time. So stop telling me who the Mike is, who's the weak side backer. It doesn't fucking matter. These guys are both your linebackers. Like, God, Bills fans, you guys would not let me live that down when I wouldn't acknowledge that Bernard's the Mike and Dorian's the Will. It's like, oh, relax. Yes, Bernard wears the green dot. That's great. Okay, let's relax. Let's come back to planet Earth here. But again, Milano resumes as your best linebacker, your LB1, even if he doesn't wear the green dot. Anyway, he's a total injury question mark. The last 2 years have just derailed his impact on this defense. Really poor timing, not long after they gave him a contract extension, but he has played just 22% of available snaps over the last 2 seasons. And even last year, he played in 4 games in the regular season, came back in the playoffs, and just he wasn't his old self, man. Like, he wasn't getting off blocks like he was supposed to. His missed tackle rate on his career was double last year than it was on his career. Missed 24% of his tackle attempts last year, trying to battle back from that arm injury. It's just like, yeah, like, you don't even really evaluate the tape at that point. So important. But he's a very conversation to Joey Bosa. It's like, is he going to be out there all season? And what version of him is he going to be when he's out there? Kind of slapping a player rating on Matt Milano at this point in time is really tough. I will say, 30 years old, coming up on a contract extension, 30 years old is not some death sentence of an age for a linebacker. And that's the same age as Joey Bosa. So obviously, if he can get back out there, if he can move well, if he's able to be his old self, I mean, he's a top, 5 to 8 linebacker in the league when he's at his full self. He's a brilliant coverage defender. Even if he's not the fastest guy, he's got really fluid hips, his ability to kind of sink back in zones, and he's got that elite zone feel to take away throwing windows, to make plays on the ball, to convert interceptions. And he's a very nasty run defender. He's undersized. He plays at about 223, I think, is his listed weight at 6 foot. Like, he's very much undersized, but he finds his way to the ball with a lot of instincts. So just a total wild card in terms of trying to rank the guy and knowing what you're going to get from him. You do have Terrell Bernard next to him. And this is probably where, if you couldn't tell earlier, I've had my most heated conversations with Bills fans, is that I just don't think Terrell Bernard is that good of a football player. I think he's fine. I think he's really smart. He's got good zone IQ. And for a defense that, above all, they prioritize communication within their zones and proper alignment and being sound as a defense, he does bring a lot to the table mentally that a lot of other linebackers wouldn't, and I acknowledge that. That's a core reason why they paid him, and ultimately why they felt like they had to pay him, because he is their green dot guy. And yes, Bills fans, even if that doesn't really change anything in terms of their coverage usage or formation or how their on-field play changes, that does make a difference for pre-snap conversations. But anyway, I get why McDermott likes having him out there, because he's kind of an extension of him as a coaching staff and as a linebacker. But he's not a very traitsy, explosive impact player when I watch Bills games. And more often than not, I find myself, leaving a lot to be desired from his tape. I think he misses too many tackles. I don't think he's got great range in coverage. I don't think he's got the size to really make an impact around the line of scrimmage and be this great run defender. He does he will have a few plays a year where he understands the route concept and he baits the quarterback, and he will have some anywhere from 1 to 3 like really pretty looking coverage plays when he's in the right spot and he reads it out correctly. But that's once every 5-6 weeks, right? Like, I don't know, man. I get why they paid him, but I just don't get that excited about him. As an LB2, he's fine. But that is just where it's like so important to me that Matt Milano can find a way to get back full force and stay out there full force, because he is, to me, just the much more of a game changer than a guy like Terrell Bernard, that if you're able to slide Bernard down the pecking order and you can kind of hide him as your LB2 and he just kind of sets things pre-snap for you while Milano is the more difference-making, playmaking linebacker, that's a pretty damn good setup. You just can't guarantee that right now with what we've gotten from Milano the last couple of years. But this room is deep. It's one of the deeper linebacker rooms in the league, frankly. Like, I love Dorian Williams, and I understand that the coverage stuff has not come along with him, and surely he stepped in last year and he was lost in coverage a lot of the times, and teams were able to kind of exploit him off of play action and finding those openings behind him. So I get that they ultimately felt like, when they extend Terrell Bernard, they ultimately feel like we can't really turn the keys over to Dorian because of the coverage stuff, which they value a lot in this defense. So I understand that. Like, Bernard's not going to really bust coverages or get exploited in the way that Dorian is. If they can get that to come along for Dorian, who's still very young, he has outrageous upside. I mean, he's so fast. The way he plays the run is inspirational, dude. Like, he plays with his hair on fire, was a huge impact. I think he was quite clearly, at least last year, getting about a half season's worth of reps to show what he can do. Last year, he was the better run defender than Terrell Bernard. And right now, they have the same run defense rating for me, just because it's a smaller sample size on Dorian. But I, at some point, would love to see more Dorian Williams, but this might be setting up nicely where, okay, maybe he does need another year of development. He's only in his third year. He's only 24 years old. I mean, there's a lot of linebackers that get drafted at Dorian Williams' age. So you're certainly not writing off the idea that he can get better in coverage. So maybe you're talking about one more year, learning from Matt Milano, who's on the end of his contract year. Maybe in a year we still do get Dorian, who gets to head into the fourth year of his rookie contract. And that would be like the biggest screaming breakout potential season you could imagine. But I really like his future outlook. And if anything does happen to Matt Milano, there's a world where something does click coverage-wise. And if that happens, I mean, it's not crazy to think that Dorian Williams could be the next Matt Milano here as like a legit top 5, top 10 linebacker. I really think that much of him. Loved him as a prospect. The Bills clearly did too. They spent a third-round pick on him. This is the sweet spot of like draft and develop linebackers. The majority of quality linebackers in the NFL come in that third, fourth round range. And I think Williams screams like, eventual breakout one way or another. But then you also have Shaq Thompson, and that's another nice piece to have as insurance against Matt Milano. He knows this defense. He grew up in it. I would have to go back. I think, that when McDermott was in Carolina with Ron Rivera, right, they would have drafted Shaq Thompson together. I think he was like 2014. Like, I'd have to go back and check, but that definitely adds up, and I'm almost positive he coached him in Carolina. But if nothing else, Shaq Thompson grew up in this defensive scheme. Thompson has still played well when he's been healthy, but I mean, his injury record is like he's been non-existent the last 2 years. Season-ending injury week 4 last year, and a season-ending injury week 2 the year before that. But 31 years old, he's a bounce-back candidate back on this, in this system as well. So I really like that signing as a kind of like the Bosa signing, a low risk, high reward type of deal. It's hard to say exactly where this room's going to land, how good everybody's going to be, when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen. But at the end of the day, like, they got options to the point that they're going to have a pretty good linebacker room one way or another. So they do come out as my 15th ranked linebacker room overall. There's absolutely potential for that to be more top 10. If Milano can get back to the best version of himself, or if, you can hit some green lights with Dorian or Shaq Thompson as well. I hate to say it, Bills fans, but Terrell Bernard is locked in as your LB2, and I just think that is a limiting factor. I just do. have at me on that if you want. It's just what I see when I watch the player. I would be much more excited about this linebacker room, frankly, if Bernard was just out of the picture. I know that's harsh, but I think the upside of this group with Milano, Williams, and Thompson is much more interesting to me than, yeah, we're throwing Bernard out there because he gets to wear the green dot. Like, you can't tell me Milano can't handle that with his experience in this defense, or Dorian can't handle that in year 3, or Shaq Thompson can't handle that. You know what I'm saying? So curious what Bills fans think, if you're with me on the Bernard takes or not. But they do have one other guy here. It's Joe Andreessen, Buffalo Joe, as we learned in Hard Knocks. Fun story. Played at UB, and played a little bit last year. Showed some flashes. Like, there could be something there. Undrafted free agent in 2024. If nothing else, is a special teamer in depth. At least worth mentioning there. And he makes the team here for a second year in a row. But yeah, there's your linebacker room. Definitely a wild card for this defense. And then we go to the secondary, which it's really more the same. A lot of turnover, a lot of question marks, injuries, vets, you name it. But as you look at their offseason, not really a lot of losses other than Rasul Douglas, who just wasn't very good for them last year, but did play 78% of their snaps starting for them. And then they did trade Kyer Elam, their former first-round pick bust, to the Dallas Cowboys. As we know, the Cowboys like making bad trades. Speaking of which, for those that missed it, I did do a live stream reaction to the whole Micah Parsons thing, how it impacted the deep dives, breaking down the D-line splits, the defensive splits, all of it, that you now see reflected with Green Bay climbing in the rankings and Dallas dropping a little bit. But yeah, if you did miss it, you can go to the live stream portion on my YouTube page and find it there. And while you're searching my YouTube page, make sure you're subscribed if you're not already. But back to the point here, enough plugs. You've got at cornerback some additions. So Tre'Davious White comes back. I'm like kind of cautiously optimistic about that, as we'll talk about. But they draft obviously Maxwell Harrison in the first round. He gets hurt kind of midway through camp. He's going to start on IR, but will make a return hopefully sooner rather than later. And then Dorian Strong as well, really good value in the 6th round. So hopefully upgraded at cornerback. There's no guarantee that any of those 3 guys are even better than Rasul Douglas, but more than enough reason to believe that they've got a better cornerback room than they did last year. And then safety, staying neutral for me. They're not really losing anybody, but not any major additions. They do bring Jordan Poyer back. He's currently on the practice squad, but will probably climb his way back up once they get a further look at him. So that's fine. That is what it is. And then Jordan Hancock as well, 5th round kind of developmental pick out of Ohio State. So I said neutral at safety and then hopefully upgraded at cornerback. But as we hinted at, kind of another murky, questionable secondary here where you can really start to see like, geez, dude, this Bills defense has potential. If Sean McDermott can kind of sort through all this stuff, like, there's room for us to be praising Sean McDermott for navigating kind of a muddy roster with a lot of question marks. But a lot of work to do at the first 2 levels of the defense we talked about. And same here with the secondary. You got young players that got to develop. You got a CB3 dilemma. Let's get into it. So you do have kind of like the defensive line, like you've got your bona fide locked in studs. You've got Christian Benford on the outside. I don't have too much to add on Christian Benford. I think he's in the top 10 to 15 of corners in the NFL. He's a solidified number 1 caliber corner. He's not shut down or anything. They don't really ask their corners to be shut down. They play so much zone coverage, but he's super high IQ. He's got enough traits. He's not the fastest guy, but that doesn't matter when you're playing so much off coverage. So he's a very good player. He tackles kind of like we said in the intro, where that's a big part of what they do, like limiting explosive plays. One of the better tackling corners in the league, especially among outside corners. So very, very stable number 1 corner there in Benford. He gets a nice contract, deservedly so. And then you have Teron Johnson, still one of the better slot corners in the league. Not the twitchiest guy. Not even the most like physically imposing slot corner. I don't think of him like I think of like Mike Hilton, or maybe like kind of the way we talk about what we're hoping like Jahdae Barron's going to be as a rookie, where they're kind of like stocky half linebacker types. No, he's more of like that. I don't want to call him lanky, but in terms of like, again, physically imposing slot corner, not so much, but he's savvy at getting off blocks and a pretty good tackler. And then as a coverage player, like he's probably the highest zone IQ slot corner in the league. I think you could probably give that to him. Maybe Kenny Moore, but inside this system, he plays really well, communicates, picks guys up when he needs to. Really good at playing that curl flat area where he can kind of have that good spatial awareness if they're running a flood concept or curl flats or whatever it is where they're trying to high-low that slot defender playing a curl flat zone. He's really good at that balance and confusing the quarterback. And sometimes he'll bait you into those pick sixes that, for him can turn into touchdowns. That's the worst area to throw an interception is when you think you got the flat and that slot corner's getting depth and then he jumps down and there's nobody there to tackle him as he's in a full sprint towards the end zone. So really, really effective at times in that. But yeah, like no questions there, right? Benford, Johnson, great. All thumbs up there. That really sets the floor for this secondary that does get pretty solid rankings. They rank 16th to 20th. But you might think that would be a little bit higher when you have such a stable CB1 and slot corner duo, but it gets dragged down when you have this many other question marks. So your CB3 is completely up in the air, really between two dart throws here. So the return of Tre'Davious White, maybe this is the Hard Knocks hype getting, sucked into the storyline here. But he's probably been the thing I've enjoyed the most out of getting exposure inside this Bills team is just a reminder of like how much of an elite football character Tre'Davious White is. Just so loved in that locker room, but not just that, like staying late after practice, running hills, like his wife or girlfriend, whichever it is, there to support him. And he's like, I got to put in these extra reps. Like I need every advantage I can get. Like I can't quite move like I used to, but we got to get every bit back as he can. Man, I kind of have this gut feeling that he could have a bounce back season here. He's not physically what he used to be, but like you don't need to be as a CB3 really in a zone heavy system. They're not asking him to be all pro Tre'Davious White, but can he be like a good, smart outside CB3 that has a nice bounce back year? I could see it. No guarantee. He was tough to watch at times last year, but I do think later in the season for Baltimore, he was a little bit better than he was earlier in the year for the Rams when they just released him because he wasn't physically back in shape yet. But he wins this job for now after Maxwell Harrison goes down. That really opened up the door for White to solidify himself in that role. But I don't think it was really a question for them, just having watched Hard Knocks. Like, I don't think it was really a question for them who was going to be the starter once Maxwell Harrison got hurt. But I think it might be a question once Harrison comes back because this was their first round pick and they understand like, yes, this season is very important, but they also are thinking about like upside and having difference makers on this defense in a way that they haven't. And Harrison has difference making potential. He is an elite of the elite athlete, elite speed, elite burst, elite ball skills, frankly. And he has potential to become like, just as an athlete, like there's a lot of like Jair Alexander in there with him where he just moves in a way that even these, all-world athletes at cornerback in the NFL can't move. And what's interesting about him is he mostly played off-zone cover 3 in Kentucky system or off-zone cover 4, which they're going to do here. But at least like the Bills, even if they're a zone-heavy defense, they do still run man coverage like 20% of the time, which I would wager was more than he ran at Kentucky. He has the traits to be a really high-end man corner. He just hasn't done a lot of it. So it'll be interesting, like once he can get back healthy. The injury, I think it was like a high ankle sprain or something that like once he's recovered, like it should be good to go. Please correct me if I'm wrong about that one, Bills fans. But there was definitely some hype coming out of early camp, and then Hard Knocks happens, and you see how much they like him. They might end up asking Trey to take a backup role when Harrison comes back, and then it's like, all right, kind of another one of these tradesy boom or bust type of picks. I think the Bills kind of went out with this draft and said, you know what, we've drafted the AJ Epinesses of the world. We've swung for floor-raising players, guys that, fit the Bills culture mentality. I think they said it's time to swing for some difference-making players. That draft just screamed it to me. I mean, all three of those D linemen we talked about and Maxwell Hairston here, and even kind of foregoing some of the off-field questions there as well, taking some of those swings. I can't sit here, and I know we haven't had the Ravens deep dive, but I can't sit here and be as harsh on the Ravens for kind of selling their soul for Mike Green without at least bringing up that there were sexual assault allegations against Maxwell Hairston. Now, the reason I'm not nearly as harsh on the Bills is not to defend any possible actions that Maxwell Hairston may or may not have committed, but you're talking about one girl and a sexual assault allegation. Again, not to diminish the severity of that, but you're talking about that versus a guy that, in Mike Green, entered college with a no-nonsense clause because of something that happened in high school. He gets kicked out of Virginia because of a second situation. He then has to play his college ball at Marshall and then has egregious interviews at the Combine, and then the entire NFL lets a bona fide top 10 talent fall to the end of the second round versus Maxwell Hairston, one case, and he ends up getting drafted about where he was supposed to get drafted. Much different situation, in my opinion, but I will at least bring it up, to be fair, to Ravens fans, really, on that one. But hopefully, whatever it is or wasn't, Hairston's going to be, good person, right head on his shoulders, and hit as a human being and a football player. And we can leave it at that as we move forward, really with the rest of the cornerback room, I think, where you got some guys that have been around here. Jamarcus Ingram, more of a practice, a special teamer. Cam Lewis is kind of their hybrid DB that's actually shown some good stuff in coverage, but he really struggles as a run defender because he's undersized. So probably not going to carve out a starting role, but in dime defense, when it's going to be a pass, like he's probably their dime back when they want to run dime. Maybe, could be Trey White, could be any number of guys here. Dane Jackson's back on the practice squad. You know what you're getting into him for the most part. But the one other fascinating guy here is Dorian Strong. Really liked Strong. I thought he was one of the steals of the draft, frankly. They get him in the 6th round. I had a 3rd round grade on him and totally had him pegged as this year's potential Christian Benford, and as definitely a Bills target. Fits the system, incredibly high zone IQ guy. Loved his tape. I think you talk about such an underrated part of coverage is the mental route anticipation, an ability to squeeze space quickly. He's got that side of things, even if he's not super athletic. And that's the same thing you would probably say about Christian Benford. And I even went as far as saying in my draft grades video that I'm not predicting that it happens, but I would not be the least bit surprised if, just as we saw Kyer Elam was not good and Christian Benford was out of the same draft class, I said I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if yet again their 1st round pick was not good in Maxwell Hairston, but they hit on Dorian Strong as a 6th round pick, so it ends up not mattering. Again, not predicting that happens. I like the dart throwing Hairston roughly where they drafted him. It's more of a testament to Dorian Strong being such a Bills type of corner, and I think they have potentially another insurance piece there out of this draft class. And I love that they also didn't just go fully into athletes, boomer bust, as the rest of the league keeps letting Dorian Strong slip because he's not this great athlete, but he's not a horrible athlete either. But as the rest of the league lets that value slip down the board, the Bills say, we'll pick that up and bring him in. So it's 5 deep of a pretty fascinating cornerback room. They just have their question marks there, no doubt, at that CB3 spot. And then the other thing that does kind of drag this secondary down a little bit is the safety room. This is one of the worst safety rooms in the league. I will go that far on this unit. I'm not a big Taylor Rapp guy. I think in terms of communication on the back end, which this team puts an absolute premium on, he's got that. And in terms of tackling consistency and run defense, he's great. He's not a horrible player, but he's just so limited in coverage. And he's probably not a guy that you want as a full-time starting deep safety, whether it's in a 2-shell structure or single high, but he'll end up doing both. And we saw it in that Denver Broncos playoff game, a smart coordinator is going to say, all right, we're going to come out the gate. We're going to take Troy Franklin from the slot, and I'm going to ask him to just run straight past Taylor Rapp. And Bo, I want you to throw the football to him. They get a deep touchdown off of that right out the gate. He cannot move back there. So I think he's extremely limited, athletically speaking. I think there's a line there. I've praised a lot of like slower safeties for being really like some of the best safeties in the league, frankly. And talking about how like 40 times overrated at safety in many of those cases, guys like Jesse Bates, Xavier McKinney in this draft, Xavier Watts, there's a bunch of dudes, Kyle Hamilton. All those guys are like, 4.58, 4.6 speed, like still pretty solid though for a safety. And not to like obsess about 40 time, but I really think there is kind of a line there when you're talking about Taylor Rapp, who has like 4.74 speed. That's what he ran and that's what he plays at. A smart team and the right quarterback is going to be able to scheme that up. So I just don't love him as a starter, and he's going to start again this year. He does some good things for this defense, especially in run defense, but he holds their coverage grade back. He just does. And then Cole Bishop's just a complete young wild card. They're going to start him here. I loved Cole Bishop as a prospect. My high-end pro comp on him was Micah Hyde, someone that played slot corner in college, projected as a split safety. Move in the future at the NFL level, and love the way he moves. I loved his zone IQ and stuff in college, but it just, the communication and handling this complex system that does pretty much run everything on the back end was a lot for him last year. And he's got to get better tackling and filling the run too. So a long way for him to go. I love the potential. He's very young, second round pick last year. He brings a lot of upside there too. So they're expecting those two to be your starters, but if Bishop really struggles, I think we probably see this team make a change either to DeMar Hamlin, who's just kind of another Taylor Rapp. Like, he just is not a good coverage player on the back end, but is a reliable tackler and smart player on the back end. He should make this team for his special teams contributions and just being a capable backup safety. But I would like to think that they might go to Jordan Poyer at some point if Cole Bishop struggles. Love having Poyer in that building as a mentor for Cole Bishop, who Poyer himself made that transition from slot to deep safety as Bishop is making. But yeah, I like bringing Poyer in. He's going to start on the practice squad, but I think that's just because that signing just happened and, they don't want to have to make a cut right now. At some point, they're going to end up having to put someone on IR, or someone's going to end up getting cut that they, like a bubble roster guy that they wanted to see some more from. Eventually, another roster spot will open up for Jordan Poyer, and I think that is where he will eventually land on the 53-man roster. And he's a floor-raising option if Bishop struggles, but at this point in his career, he's not an impact player, but in terms of having the veteran leadership, the communication, everything they value at that safety position above all, he would bring that to the table. So he's there. And then Jordan Hancock, I think, is there as a developmental option, whether it's being another one of these slot corner types that is making that switch to safety. That's their flavor, right? Micah Hyde, Cole Bishop, Jordan Poyer, all these guys are in that mold. Or if it's to develop as a slot corner behind Teron Johnson, who's not getting any younger. I think it's going to be a couple of years before we see a lot of Hancock, but he's got speed and can contribute on special teams. Just played kind of a versatile dime back role at Ohio State, and his tape was just a little bit all over the place, but he's got traits. So that was a lot between the question marks at linebacker, D-line, secondary. You can see where it's kind of tough to know where this defense is going to land. They've got a lot of work to do. They're going to be sorting through who's playing where, who's healthy, who's staying healthy, you name it. It's a tall order for Sean McDermott to turn this into a top 10 defense because roster talent-wise, they're just kind of like middle of the road. I don't think it's a bad defensive roster. I certainly don't think it's a great defensive roster. But I do think it's a good enough defensive roster that a coach of Sean McDermott's caliber should be able to get the right player development from a lot of these young players that they're counting on, put these guys that are questionable veterans in the right position to succeed, have guys step in for injuries if Bosa or Milano or Tre'Davious White aren't full go, because you've got a lot of those kind of veteran injury questions with this defense on top of a lot of youth. It's just one of the bigger hurricanes of an evaluation in terms of knowing what the hell is going on here. So there was a lot to talk about there. Very fascinating. But I am excited as hard as I am on McDermott, I am excited to see what he can do with this unit. And if he can turn this into like a top 8 defense, top 10 defense even, I'm going to have to give McDermott some credit. But with how hard it is to analyze this as we sit here today, being able to use my formula for this series, the Bills come out as my 17th overall defense, kind of ranking all these teams at their floor. Just kind of makes sense, right? With all these question marks, it's going to drag them down a little bit, and you're hoping they can hit some green lights and get lifted back up. But they are balanced 18th in pass defense there and 16th in run defense. But we do have one more side of the ball to talk about, and that is the special teams here. So as far as offseason changes with special teams, they are switching punters from Sam Martin, who is pretty solid, to Brad Robbins, who hasn't punted for a few years, and that's because when he did punt for Cincinnati a few years ago, he was real bad. So I did say downgraded at special teams at punter, but as we look at their overall special teams and how they came out with the formula that I use for this series, they came out as my 21st ranked special teams. Tyler Bass just hasn't been amazing the last few years. Averaged out over the last couple of years, 22nd for kicker grade. I think he could be poised for a bounce back season. It's not the easiest climate for a kicker. I think he's solid for what he is. We mentioned Brad Robbins, just like major question mark as their punter. They do have a good return man in Broderick Codrington. They end up in that tier of 6th to 13th for return grade among special teams in the league. And then they were a little bit all over the place in terms of the the PFF team grade for their special teams. They were 14th last year, but 28th for DVOA analysis on their special teams last year. So yeah, like below average or so for their special teams. Maybe some question marks there, but probably not a glaring weakness either. But let's summarize our Bills here. We're talking about an elite offense, our third-ranked offense in the league, and a mid-ranking defense that you're hoping can sort through some things and be good enough that you can really expect this team to get over the hump and win the Super Bowl, get to a point where you can walk into what feels like inevitably at this point, that Chiefs game, that Ravens game, walk into that game against those elite quarterbacks with a little bit more confidence in that defense. That's really where you're hoping things can go right for this Bills team, and that lies on Sean McDermott. I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but I really think this is a huge year for his stability as the head coach here, and I don't know if this is a team that would pull the trigger on that, but especially with the looming potential departure of Joe Brady, and God forbid he takes the O-line coach Aaron Kromer with him. Like, man, that could be devastating for this team, but as far as the 2025 Bills are concerned, no doubt this is a Super Bowl or bust team that has all of the potential in the world to get that done. Obviously ranking as our number 4 overall team. But before we look at the schedule, let's at least take a look at our Venn diagram and recap where their true strengths, weaknesses, and wildcard pivotal factors lie. And it's kind of a unique picture when you look at this because all of their strengths are on offense, which are quarterback, offensive coaching, and offensive line. And then all of their true weaknesses are on special teams with punter. Okay, like if that's the one position group that's your one true weakness, I think your floor's pretty good. You're in a pretty good spot. And then the other weakness is the Kansas City Chiefs after Christmas. But like, where's the defense, right? It's all in the wild cards category. All 3 levels of it. D-line, linebacker, secondary. All 3 could be weaknesses. All 3 could be strengths, honestly, depending where things lie with injured vets, young players with upside, as we've discussed. It's a fun narrative when you look at it in this perspective with the Bills. You could argue for like some aspects of the offense have some hidden upside in there too. Guys like Keon Coleman, the right side of the offensive line, certainly are like individual pockets that are wild cards for the offense. But generally speaking, the offense is what it is, and you'll take a top 3 offense if that is what it is. But the defense just has got to figure itself out here. But the last part of our conversation here is the schedule and what that can mean for this team's win total expectations and, frankly, Super Bowl expectations. We know getting that 1 seed is so important. getting to skip a playoff game where anything can happen, but when 4 of the 7 playoff teams in the AFC are likely going to have an elite quarterback, there's a decent enough chance that you have to run into one of those guys in the first round of the playoffs. So very important to be able to just skip that game. And that's something that the Bills have in their favor this year. Their schedule is an utter joke. And I saw that their over-under was 12.5. I don't know that I've ever seen a 12.5 over-under on a team. And that's new with the 17-game season. Definitely plays a factor there. But this makes me think back to like how easy that Patriots schedule was, where even the Patriots are favorites in like 11 of their games. Well, the Buffalo Bills should be favorites or pick 'em in every single game this season. I don't have them as an underdog once because their 3 hardest opponents, Baltimore, Philadelphia, and Kansas City, are all at home. What a gift when your own division sucks. Like the AFC East, from the Bills' perspective, is definitely the worst division in football. The only reason it might not be the worst overall division is because the Bills are as good as they are, right? But from the Bills' perspective, when you got 6 games against the Jets, the Dolphins, and the Patriots, yep, that's sitting pretty for you. And then you also play the NFC South. Are you kidding me? So you got Atlanta, New Orleans, Carolina, and then the hardest team in the NFC South, Tampa, you get at home as well. Jeez, man, that really plays in your favor. And then your AFC North matchup, that's not great, but you get Baltimore and Cincy at home, whereas Cleveland and Pittsburgh are your road games, which that's definitely how you want it if you're the Bills. You want to go on the road as not even underdogs, but go on the road expecting to beat worse teams in Pittsburgh and Cleveland, and then force Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson to come to your house. Like, dude, this schedule is maybe as big of a break as the Bills have gotten since Josh Allen has been here. So hopefully that can help this team rack up some wins against, easy opponents, get 14, 15 wins, get that 1 seed, force Kansas City to come through your house. It's possible, man. That can absolutely happen for the Bills here. And we get to end on a positive note there. They still got to take care of business. They still got to hit some green lights with this defense. But looking at this schedule, it does help me feel a lot better about the Bills this year. And for me to say I kind of like the over on a 12.5 over under is pretty freaking crazy when you think about it. But it adds up. Like, this is a good enough team that realistically, I think they should expect to at least split 4 home games against Baltimore, Kansas City, Cincinnati, and Philly. But you're home in all those games. But let's say they split those. You look at the rest of this schedule, they're going to be probably on average a touchdown favorite and not an underdog in all of the rest of their games. So just to get to 13 wins and hit this over-under, I think it's more than reasonable to say that the Bills can go 11-2 in those other games, which sounds pretty crazy, but you look at those opponents and it's like, yeah, it's going to be really hard for a lot of these teams to take down the Buffalo Bills. So there is your Buffalo Bills 2025 deep dive. We get 3 more of these to go and 3 more days without NFL football. We'll see if I can get one done a day. Fun backstory here as we're on the way out. A reason I wasn't able to drop this on Saturday is I started working on the graphics for our next team and then said, oh shit, that's my number 3 ranked team. So I do already have like all the graphics done, which is like a 7 to 8 hour process. I already have just about all those done for our next team. So almost certainly we're looking at Monday, maybe in the evening for our next one. And then we'll see where we're at from there. But we're in the home stretch, baby. Thank you for watching. Let me know your thoughts, your comments. I had some takes here on Sean McDermott and Terrell Bernard. Let me hear your thoughts, NFL fans, Bills fans. Please do hit that like button on the way out as well. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you very soon. Peace.